Shalom, everybody. My name is Mark Rosenberg. I'm with Nefesh B'Nefesh, and part of our efforts to make sure that everyone is getting the information they need and support. We are having a follow-up briefing here with the IDF Spokesperson's office. It's important that we all stay connected to Pikuda Oref and the news. We're all probably checking a little too often, and this is an opportunity for us to hear from Faye Goldstein, who is with the IDF Spokesperson's office, to understand what is happening here on day 31. It's an opportunity for us to listen and also ask some questions. Please, if you have something you would like to ask, please put in the Q&A and we'll be able to get to it. Thank you very much for taking time of your busy schedule, and we look forward to hearing what you have to say.
Amazing. Thank you for having me. And just for all you guys that are here, I actually am an Olim myself. I moved here with Nefesh B'Nefesh about 5.5 years ago. Joined the army and am currently now in the reserves. And, what that means is, I have both the perspective of many of you as Olim, as people living in Israel, as those that are experiencing this as civilians and citizens of the country, but also now the perspective of someone in the IDF that is kind of coming at it from a little bit of a different side and a little bit more of an understanding or in-depth understanding of kind of what's going on. What I would like to kind of go through today, and I think I'm going to open it up earlier for questions. I'm going to give you a little bit of an overview, some numbers, some stats, a little bit of where we're holding, what our goal is, and what has been going on a little bit more on the ground here from the IDF perspective. And again, please put all those questions in the Q&A, and I'd be happy to answer as many of them. So right now, we are already a month past October 7th. And what we're focusing on right now is not only about October 7th. This mission right now against Hamas, to dismantle Hamas, completely dismantle any threat that Hamas poses, is not about what happened on October 7th. It is to ensure that October 7th or something like it can never, ever happen again. And we're focusing right now, and we're recognizing that Hamas is an incredibly powerful terrorist organization with quite sophisticated capabilities. And we've seen that from that attack on October 7th, but even now, as they're continuing to make efforts they're firing rockets, they're still attempting infiltrations, they're still going about terrorizing and focusing on terrorizing Israelis. As many of you probably have been running to shelters or running to your stairwells over the past month. Now, just again, to give you a drop down a little bit in numbers, right now, there have been over 1,400 Israelis killed, more than 5,400 injured, and 348 IDF fatalities. As of today, there have been 31 IDF soldiers killed in action, starting that have been on the ground in Gaza. And we are very well aware of the danger of dealing with Hamas. We're very, very focused on going and dismantling, again, not only from the air, but in depth and deep inside, to ensure that we're separating Hamas's strongholds, which is Gaza City, the northern area of Gaza, from the southern area, which we are building we have a humanitarian corridor, which we are encouraging over and over again, Gazan civilians to move southern. Now, the aerial strikes that we are conducting, as well as the efforts on the ground, are impairing Hamas's, to some extent, Hamas's capabilities to fight back and to harm and to commit other terror activities against Israel. And we are focusing not only on Hamas infrastructure, and that's one of the big things, is focusing on dismantling them from the infrastructure level, their intelligence level, their leadership level. And we're going not only from the top down. Yahya Sinwar, yesterday, we struck Mohsen Abu Zina, the head of Hamas's weapons development, all the way down to any foot soldier of Hamas. And our goal is, again, to fully and completely dismantle Hamas, and at the same time, recognizing that we are focusing on bringing home our hostages. We are both taking a defensive route, which we have seen earlier on in this operation, where we have the Iron Dome and we are defending Israelis. We are making and ensuring that civilians both in the south and civilians up in northern Israel are secure, whether that means moving them away from the realm from fire, or whether it means to making sure that our soldiers are there ready. But we're also focusing on the offensive. And within that offensive, this is something that I'm sure you've heard before, and it's really quite true, is the very, very focused effort to ensure and minimize as much civilian harm, right? So that means dropping leaflets, calling, making calls. We made more than 5 million calls to Gazan civilians to evacuate. And 90,000 civilians have moved from the north to southern to southern Gaza, through that corridor, through the humanitarian corridor, to find a little bit more of a safer area, safer zone in the south. At that same time as doing whatever that possible within our capabilities, again, within the framework of needing to fully, completely dismantle Hamas, the terrorist organization that has been ruling Gaza, and within the rules of warfare, we are also focusing on ensuring that there is humanitarian aid that is going into Gaza. And 96 trucks entered Gaza yesterday. That is, and leading into more than 750 trucks since the start of, again, that is food and water, and ensuring that the civilians there do have what they need. We have done 4 different days of evacuation corridors, ensuring that there is a time frame for the civilians to again head south. And our goal is to ensure that we are able to encircle, and we have successfully encircled northern Gaza, which has been Hamas's strongholds. I have spent personally the last 4 weeks, almost every day down south, every day in one of the kibbutzim, one of the moshavim, speaking to civilians that were there, speaking to mothers of hostages, speaking to brothers of those that were killed. Just yesterday, I was with a survivor of the Nova massacre of the party, a bartender that went back to retrace her steps, and we went to search for an hour and a half to find the hole that she was hiding in, that she hid in. This is very, very real. The threat is ongoing, but also what we have seen through the results of the October 7th massacre is the absolute need for Hamas to have zero control or zero ability to use Gaza as a launch pad for attacks against Israelis. And our goal is to, again, both protect Israelis, but also to dismantle Hamas, and at the same time to minimize harm as much as possible, despite Hamas's best efforts to put their civilians in harm's way. There are tunnels, and I've seen them personally myself with my 2 eyes, built within areas in Gaza that are right next to schools. These are deep terror tunnels that are embedded intentionally in areas, launch pads, intelligence centers, firing rockets from parking lots of hospitals, rockets that oftentimes actually are failed launches, right? So out of the roughly 9,400 rockets that Hamas has fired against at Israel, more than 1,000 of them were failed launches. And some of the stories that you might be hearing, there was that claim that the IDF had hit a hospital, and it was an Islamic Jihad rocket that failed and misfired and hit the parking lot. This is not atypical. That is not an atypical. We weren't surprised by that. That is something that happens very, very often. Again, indicating and showing us the intentional efforts of Hamas to utilize Gazan civilians for their military aim, telling them not to leave. At one of the first evacuation corridors that we opened, Hamas actually put roadblocks, took people's keys from Gaza and didn't let them move. And we're doing whatever we can possible to, again, defend Israelis, and also in an offensive route, ensuring that we are completely dismantling Hamas as a terror organization. that's a little bit of an overview, and I think it makes sense to, open it up for questions, because I think there's probably a lot of things that are going on that I might not have mentioned, but I might be able to answer for you. So let's get started with some of the Q&As, and we can go from there.
Thank you very much. Eloquently explaining a very complex situation unfolding. There's some really great questions that came here, so we're going to try and get through them quickly. The first question that came through, the very first one, is what is the IDF doing to ensure that something, as they call here, the Black Shabbat, the Shabbat Shachor, will not happen in the north after the war is over? What are some of the preparations that are happening?
So there have been 20 rockets fired into northern Israel as of now from Hezbollah, and we are not interested in a multi-front war. That being said, we are responding to every single attack in the northern front. There are soldiers and IDF forces that are there and absolutely ready to do whatever is necessary to secure our northern border. We have also evacuated many of the communities from the north in order to ensure security and safety and freedom to do whatever is necessary when and if it does need to happen. But that being said, we are not interested in multi-front war, and the IDF and the state of Israel does not want Hezbollah to get involved in this war against Hamas. This is a war against Hamas. This is a war against the Hamas infrastructure, the Hamas terror organization that has been ruling Gaza with an iron fist. And Hezbollah should think very, very strong and hard if they want to, and Lebanon, if they want to get involved in this southern war. We're ready if necessary, and the IDF is strong and has the ability to secure and protect every Israeli civilian from here on out.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to bunch two questions together. I think a very good question came here. There are reports that are U.S. special forces in Gaza trying to locate the hostages. Is that true? Is one. And how can the IDF be sure that there aren't terrorists that are slipping through the humanitarian corridor with the other people that are moving on?
So I can't answer anything about the first question there. The second question is Hamas is doing whatever possible to get through, whether that means using ambulances to try to move from Shifa Hospital, from the other hospitals towards the corridor, towards the southern area. There have been reports that we've heard of Hamas fighters trying to evacuate themselves when Egypt had opened the border, trying to go as injured. And after going through the list, it was recognized that many of those that were asking to leave Gaza as injured civilians were actually Hamas fighters. There is very much an attempt. There's very much an attempt from Hamas, again, to embed themselves within the civilian infrastructure and to embed themselves within these humanitarian corridors to harm their civilians. In fact, there have been attacks against Israeli soldiers and against Israeli forces that are securing this humanitarian area by Hamas, which only harms their own people, which only harms the civilians in Gaza, this attempt to harm IDF soldiers within that humanitarian crossing.
Okay. We have an assortment of questions, so I think this is an interesting, a technical one. How does the IDF make those phone calls? You mentioned they made millions of phone calls to people in Gaza. How does that happen?
Can't go into that.
Okay, very good. I think it's.
There's phones and there's SMSs. It's
That's good. I like some of the practical questions. There's some other questions here. Obviously, a bigger question, a macro questions. This person identifies the root cause of the wars in future wars is Iran, and what can the IDF do with its allies in the U.S. to ensure that this influence is limited?
We're very thankful for all of our allies in the region and those that are not in the region, the United States, and we're working very, very closely hand in hand to dismantle terror and to dismantle Iran's opportunities here in this region and what they're doing to prop up Hamas as a terror organization. That's as much as I can answer about that.
Here's a question. I appreciate your answering as best and straightforward as you can. You speak on the information that the general press speaks about civilians in Gaza and their suffering. The reports exaggerated, and I'm going to pair that with a question that came in here already 4 times in here. It's a good question to end on, but I'm going to put it here in the middle. Here is what is the best way to stay up on the information and get the news, because there's a lot of disinformation out there. What would you suggest?
So about information, and I don't remember the first question you asked, but about the information, I suggest everyone joins the IDF's Telegram channel. That's for sure. You can get the same information that the journalists are getting live as they get it out. You can just look up Israel Defense Forces on Telegram. It's any push notification that we send out to the media is accessible there. We also have a Substack, social media channels. Substack was just actually launched. We also just launched a podcast called Mission Brief. You can listen to that. We're trying to make an effort, very much so, the spokespersons unit on the digital front, not just the social media front, but beyond that into the digital arena. So you can, I can send this to you afterwards, the links. I'll probably send you just a link tree that has all the links to the relevant places. But I would suggest Telegram. I would suggest the IDF's channel on Telegram if you want as up-to-date statistics and numbers and details.
Thank you very much. When we send out the copy of the recording will include a copy of these resources as well. The first question was reports of civilians in Gaza suffering. Are they exaggerated? How are the citizens of Israel understanding what's really, because the press is using Hamas's health ministry to talk about these numbers.
Right, and I think that's exactly it, right? You talk about the health ministry in Gaza. It is Hamas runs health ministry, and you know the numbers. We don't know the numbers right now, and the fact that they're coming out with numbers so quickly and so immediate is actually one indication of the potential of it not necessarily being the correct numbers or being exaggerated. We don't have the numbers of what is the civilian impact in Gaza right now, and what we have seen from any of the evidence that we've seen from any of the other experiences, both with Hamas, but also even within this war, is the very, very drastic exaggeration of those numbers, right? If we look at just even the hospital, the hospital that was blamed on Israel, which was not, again, that Islamic Jihad hospital, the first reports out of the Gaza Health Ministry were 500 killed in that blast. When everything was broken down and there was actually proof of what happened, the numbers were less than 20. And we just kind of see those shifts and that narrative, you know, they're going to try to use as high numbers as possible because that's their goal. Their goal is Gazan civilian deaths because that's part of the warfare that they're fighting. It's not just a physical war, it is an information war. It's a psychological war. And I would say to take every single number with not just a grain of salt, but an entire Yam HaMelech of salt.
Okay, we have dozens of questions. I think there's at least a dozen of them that have to do with the hostages. Our prayers are with them. Our prayers are with the soldiers that they should be successful and safe. And everybody wants these children and these soldiers and these adults that are there. Can you answer or just speak about what efforts are going into and specifically this question, how adamant is Israel that there's going to be no ceasefire until hostages are returned?
I can't speak on Israel policy decisions at all. What I can say is that the hostages is a top priority of the IDF. It is not, it is one of, it is up there. And this is one of our goals, is to ensure bringing home these hostages. And we are doing whatever we can, again, without going into details of exactly the operational activities that we are doing in order to bring them home. But it is a top priority, top of mind. There has been significant resources that we have been allocating specifically towards that mission. And it is top of mind to every single soldier, every single commander, and everybody in the IDF when it comes to what we're doing in that area.
It's comforting to hear that. I'm going to answer this question, even though you're the featured speaker. As someone wrote here, will Hadar Golden and Oren Shal's bodies be part of the 2014 war, be part of the hostage release? There's a difference between what you said, the policy decisions of the government. Okay, I want to. That's what you answered. What the government is trying to, and what the IDF is trying to execute. But I wanted to mention them as well as part of our efforts and prayers to make sure that everyone is returning home here. Questions that people have really about security. Again, there's about 6 questions that came in about that. Everyone feels, as we all do, shaken what happened on October 7th and other parts of the country. There's a funeral tomorrow for Chayel Bodedet from Atlanta, who was attacked in the Old City and murdered. And everybody we have participants from towns all across the country. What is the IDF's position on, now you spoke about the South and the North, about the security around the country?
Follow Picud Oref, follow the requirements, stay close to shelters, watch your back. There are systems in place to secure civilians, right? We have the Iron Dome. There is efforts to ensure as often as much as possible the safety and security of Israeli civilians. That being said, we're in a state of war. We are still in a state of war. There are specific requirements by the Home Front Command about how many people, and I don't have them off the top of my head, but how many people can gather in a certain place, how far you should be from shelter. All the shelters in the entire country are open. Stick to stairwells, stay close, make sure you are in an area that you know where to go to if something happened, and just keep in mind that we are currently in a war. It is not business as usual. But that being said, try to live and try to continue building. And if you're, try to continue working, try to, focus on the things that you need to focus on, but, watch yourself, watch your surroundings. I think that's the best I could offer.
Thank you. So we have time for a few more questions here. There's three or four about this topic here. We are honored to have someone from the IDF spokesperson's office, and clearly that you are part of the machine to get the message out. Hence the emblem that is behind you. Some people are critical that maybe the message is not getting out strong enough. Although what your example you mentioned before about the hospital and how quick the IDF has been to maybe quash those terrible rumors or other campaigns that are out there. What are some resources do you suggest for people to share with conversations about people who are making such accusations? Or the reverse question, what can Israeli citizens, Jews around the world, do better to help persuade the narrative and the things that you're part of the establishment, part of the citizens can do to help support Israel?
Yeah. I mean, listen, it is hard. It's hard no matter how hard we fight and how hard we try and how much we do, both here in the IDF, but also even as, you guys as civilians, that there are still so much hate and so much denial and so much horrendous accusations against Israel and against the IDF. There are things that you can do that we can't do. You can call people out more for their lies, right? And you also have to remember, particularly, that the IDF and the IDF spokesperson's office is very much focused on the IDF operational activity and what the IDF is doing. You as civilians can speak more about your personal experience, speak about the people you know, speak more about the hostages, go and comment back on people's posts, share or report things on social media, tweet back at those that are denying things that happen. But I also want to remind you that everywhere and always throughout our history and Jewish history, there have been deniers. There have been people that have said, we don't have a right to exist. Israel, Jews don't have a right to exist. And it is something that even no matter how much you fight it, it is so embedded in people's hate that we can just keep on trying and doing whatever you can and try to encourage your close circles. But I would just say this is something that is so deeply entrenched that the best you can really truly do is keep on fighting that good fight, keep on sharing the photos and sharing the visuals and sharing the stories of people, and go start with your own circle, right? We can't always change the entire world, but you can change the 10 people that you went to college with that may or may not understand what's going on. And I would just say, like, going and saying, you're a liar, you don't even understand, you don't even see this. Show visuals, show photos, show the stories, show the faces of people, because people connect to people. They don't connect to governments. They don't connect to IDF necessarily. People connect to the friend that they sat for a beer with, that they understand, oh, that's someone I actually would hang out with. Let me understand their feelings. Let me maybe understand a little bit that I have experienced, maybe something as similar as they did. So I think that would just really be what I would suggest, is start small. Start with 5 people, move to 10 people, And don't be overwhelmed that you can't change the world, because 1, 2, 5, 10, and combined with the 160 people here and all your social media channels and all of your places, that's quite a big power. That's quite a big power.
Thank you. I know our time is short. I want to squeeze in 2 questions. I think they're 2 very good. And I also want to say, so I'm not asking all the questions. Several questions came through. I know you're not going to be able to answer. And I want those who are attending and listening to realize that we're not going to ask the IDF to disclose how they are finding the tunnels and what they're doing with them and the laser that they're shooting. There's certain things that aren't being said publicly because other people are listening as well. I just want to acknowledge the group of questions that ask very specific questions about technology and intelligence questions. Here's a serious question, and then I'll ask the final question, which is a question that's on, I think, all of our hearts. What's the IDF's end game, assuming that the success with Hamas happens and the return of the hostages? What's the end game, not on the political level, on the IDF's level?
The end game on the IDF's level is completely and totally dismantle Hamas. That Hamas will no longer be a ruling power in Gaza, and again, will no longer be able to use Gaza as the launch pad at all for attacks against Israeli civilian. It is completely dismantling Hamas as a terror organization and as an ability to rule or control or act from Gaza. That's our end goal right now. And beyond that, that's a political conversation, and that's something, whatever is decided by those that decide. We are ready, and we are ready to do whatever it takes to ensure that the end goal of Israel is something that we help finish.
Okay, great. Our final question, phrased so beautifully, and one is identified with, I made Aliyah at 25 and the Army didn't want me, and I'm here if they still want to call me back. What can older Olim do to assist the Chayalim and their families? Another question is beautiful. How can Olim and families in America contribute to the war effort or volunteer for the IDF assignment? What would be the way to assist? It's a beautiful question, and I think it's all on many people's hearts.
Yeah, so I mean, I think there are many civilian, and I'm in so many different groups. I'm seeing such incredible efforts made by civilian organizations to support soldiers on the ground, to send food, to send support. This is something really personal, and maybe I shouldn't say this, but like I'm in reserves, right? So, and I'm not working right now. So even something my mom is simply helping by like covering some of my gas money, like if you know a soldier that is, or a miluimnik that is in, that has been serving for 30 days, think about how you can support them even, on small things. I've had friends that I've come home and I've had hot meals ready for me. Small things like that. Additionally, you can share our content, and it sounds so silly and that sounds so maybe like simple, but share the IDF's content, share things that we are getting out there, and share other organizations' work, right? Share on social, share your story as why you're supporting the efforts here, why you're in Israel, why you're staying in Israel, why you chose to move to Israel. I think everybody has different ways of helping and supporting. I have friends that are working for, organizations for the hostages. I have friends that are packaging food. I have friends that are, every time I leave, and again, I've been down south almost every day since the start of this war, and almost in every corner, there are people that are handing out food, that are handing out water, that are supporting the soldiers in that area. So keep on doing that. It's not overlooked. It's not taken for granted. It's incredibly beautiful. And keep sharing the light, keep moving towards the light and sharing light and being light.
Thank you very much. I know you have another briefing to give. Your office is extremely busy. You're doing really important work. I always think it's important to say that only 10% of the Army is combat. That's 90% of the other people are doing hard work to make sure that the machine is running. We thank you. Our prayers are with all of those soldiers and Anshe Bitachon, the security services, and we hope to only hear good news. We last heard from your office 2 weeks ago, and we hope that if we have to do another briefing in 2 weeks, that we only have wonderful things to talk about. Thank you very much, and good evening to everybody.
Good evening. Thank you.